Hey, welcome to the second course video for the song Atlantic from Sleep Token and their 2021, yes, album called This Place Will Become Your Tomb. I'm musically malnourished, and you're on my journey to go deep and wide in discovering new music and artists. In these videos, we do a deep dive into the lyrics and meaning behind the music. Listen, we don't always get it right, but we always learn something, especially when it comes to Sleep Token. The theories abound. Sometimes the lyrics are fairly cryptic, but it's always a good time. So let's get in, see what we can see. All right, here's what Genius has to say. Speculated to be about self-harm and a suicide attempt, either by cutting, drowning, or both, the lyrics reference water, flooding, drowning, blood, and cut wounds. It seems that to then go on to describe the aftermath of surviving the attempt, with hospital staff or possibly family members speaking to the victim, which we'll get to this lyric in a moment. Here's a little bit about the depth that was listed on the artwork for this one. Few theories among fans as to the significance behind the depths in the visualizers. The first for Atlantic is that 914 meters is where you can find deep sea anglerfish, one of the creatures featured in the artwork. Secondarily, the bathysphere, great word, which was launched June 11th, 1930 off the coast of Bermuda to observe deep sea creatures, perhaps the anglerfish, as its maximum depth reached was 900 meters. And lastly, some believe they just started with 914 meters, as adding 910 meters each song leads you to 10,924 meters, which is the depth of the Mariana Trench, the deepest known trench on Earth. Very cool. All right. Here we go. Call me when they bury bodies underwater. It's blue light over murder for me. I'll be honest. I've read through the lyrics and even looked over a few thoughts around them, more so from the lore side. This line still kind of confounds me. But we'll get to that in a moment. This one's interesting too. Call me when they bury bodies underwater. Obviously, the question comes in is who would be calling to him? And also, there are a few lines here, especially if you take in when they bury bodies underwater. Crumble like a temple built for future daughters to wasteland when the oceans recede. I don't know if I'm really onto anything here, and it doesn't fully connect with a lot of the other thoughts or ideas within the song, but there's something here at least just to talk about it. So I'm not making claims here. I'm just ruminating with you guys. Those lines to me begin to speak about, like, obviously future events. So this idea of when they bury bodies underwater, I don't know if it was like an end of the earth type thing, like the oceans continuing to rise type of imagery, that to wasteland when the, because then you have to wasteland when the oceans recede. So it almost feels like this flooding type thing, burying bodies underwater, but then eventually when the oceans recede, there's wasteland where the bodies would be. That's one thought. The other thing that I don't think has anything to do with it, but I just made me think about it, is the idea of almost like running out of space for bodies on the earth, and so you begin to cast bodies into the sea. So I don't know if there's anything there, just where my mind went. It's blue light over murder for me. So my first thoughts with this blue light was that it did have to do with the idea of, again, being underwater, because obviously the idea of water being bluish, when you're under and the light's coming through, there is a type of blue light. But I don't fully understand its blue light over murder for me. There is an interesting thought here that we'll get into in just a moment. I'll click on it and read it. because you wonder, is he saying like he thinks that murder is in his future and so he'd rather take his own life? There are, again, like I said, some interesting thoughts here in this idea of blue light. So this first one says, blue light in the context of this song's ocean metaphor could refer looking up and seeing the light refract through the surface of the water. This could be a symbol of drowning, i.e. bury bodies underwater. However, in the context that the second verse provides, blue light could refer to an ambulance, which have blue lights in the UK. In this sense, the murder for me could resemble a suicide attempt. If one agrees with the blue lights being from an ambulance after a suicide attempt, murder might hint at a Catholic background where suicide is a sin and one would be denied entry into paradise. See, but even with that, like, I like this idea of the blue lights. I think that's really interesting. I just don't understand the over murder for me. Crumble like a temple built from future daughters. Could be this idea. I mean, it sounds like obviously him crumbling like a temple. There are two thoughts I had here. One, it could be this idea of like future relationships, future daughters. And because obviously there's been this theme of toxic relationship, especially through sundowning. And so this idea of like the future relationships that would cause him to crumble like a temple, that's not my primary one. It's just a thought I had. The other is like, you know how some people theorize that the certain temples and landmarks and the pyramids were built from aliens? I don't know, this future daughters type thing, crumble like a temple. I don't know, dude. This song's pretty darn cryptic for me. Beautiful, artistic, and sometimes the most beautiful art is incredibly cryptic. So, to wasteland when the oceans recede. Marry in the morning, earn your bitter fodder. So, this sounds like the idea of like waking up fine, like, but then earning your bitter fodder. So, going into the day, having to work or survive, earning your bitter food. It's easier to try not to eat. So instead of going out into life, and this can obviously come with depression, the idea of going out and engaging in life, it's almost like I'd rather just not eat, which ties the two together, kind of the social anxiety side of it, or struggling to have the energy to show up at work or with your family or whatever it is. And just saying, I'd rather not eat, which is another side effect as well, obviously, if depression at times, which, I mean, it could be the opposite. You know, there are some people that with depression comes lots of eating. But it just sounds like I'd rather not eat than go engage in life. Which leads up to, you know, the idea of self-harm within this. But so flood me like Atlantic. Bandage up the trenches, anything to get me to sleep. Which, that's an interesting thing, is like, to get me to sleep. Sleep could be obviously the way we've gone into the deity, like get me to this being, this deity. Could be get me to rest, could be get me to death. But obviously the idea of bandaging up the trenches, there's a few thoughts here. Flood me like Atlantic. I really wish this was just a sweet song, because the idea of flood me like Atlantic. Jon Bellion, who I mentioned, I think in the React, has a song called Wash Over Me, or called Wash. And it's an absolutely beautiful song. It's about his wife and like wash over me. That's where I wish this was going, because that the way he sings that and the beauty of that thought, flood me like Atlantic, I like. But if that was in the sense of how Vessel speaks about relationships, if it was from sleep or from another, like flood me like Atlantic, bandage up the trenches, could be this healing of myself, these trenches that exist within me. But the other theory within the song, if it has to do with self-harm, it could be more so bandaging up these trenches from harming yourself. But it's again a little bit cryptic, followed by this anything to get me to sleep. So there is an interesting idea here that even has to do with an IV. The song frequently alludes to a suicide attempt, a drug overdose, or both. The plea may indicate wounds, trenches, being dressed, and a morphine or other IV drip inserted, which floods and sedates the narrator. The image is also somewhat consistent with a bandage, belt, or strap tied around the arm to make vessels, trenches, pop for a drug injection, again with a narcotic or sedative. I don't see that as much. This can explain the line about starvation, as severe addicts are known to forego meals to afford drugs. Sleep Token worship their fictitious? Is fictive a word? Dude, I've never heard that word. Fictive? It is. I get it. Fiction, fictitious, fictive. Maybe I have heard it and I'm just drawing a blank today, but there we go. Fictive. Sleep Token worship their fictive god sleep, so there's a double entendre portraying the sedation as something both dreadful and desirable. Interesting. Now, this part to me, if fitting the theme of the song, seems to be pretty simple to understand. I woke up surrounded, eyes like frozen planets, just orbiting the vacuum I am. That's really beautiful writing, because obviously you have the vacuum of space. He ties planets, and their eyes are just these frozen planets just staring, right? Orbiting this vacuum, this emptiness that he feels. Then they talk me through the damage. So here's what happened. Here's what you did. Consequence. Like, here's what this means. And how it's a pain they know they don't understand. This is why, to me, it doesn't feel like it's doctors or strangers. It feels like, now it could be, it could be counselors and doctors. But there also is sobbing as they turn to statues at the bedside. That imagery speaks to me more of family, loved ones, friends. Because they're saying, like, I can't understand everything that you're going through. And they're sobbing as they turn to statues at the bedside. So the statues at the bedside could be, it is literally just them standing there. It could also be this feeling of like emptiness on their part, that they're trying to understand. They just feel like lifeless almost as they sob, not being able to understand. Could also be from his perspective, is that he has an emotional despondency. So they're sobbing, but they just look to like statues to him. I'm trying not to crush into sand, because obviously sand is just, it's rocks, it's shells, all these things that are pounded and grounded, turned into sand. So flood me like Atlantic, weather me to nothing, wash away the blood on my hands. See, and this sounds like a positive thing. But it could also not be. Obviously, weather me to nothing doesn't sound positive, but washing away the blood of my hands on my hands. So I'd be curious if it is this speaking to sleep is like, and I don't know, okay, I don't know, So we are, getting close to wrapping up our journey through 21 Pilots. And they have a deep lore within their music. They have just awesome music. And also these themes around mental health, things like that. If you haven't really given 21 Pilots a chance, go find them on my channel. I've gone through every single one of their albums from self-titled all the way up through the album they released last year called Breach. And they talk a lot about mental health and have incredible and deep writing. But in their lore that's really well built, there is this, it's the idea of what's going on inside your mind. And there's a city called Dima that's run by these bishops. And the whole goal of these bishops are to control you, sedate you, and ultimately that you would give your life, that you would end your life. And they basically applaud this. They glorify this. They call them the glorious gone. And they even, like, the gravestones, there's a song called Neon Gravestones, but outside the city of Dima are a bunch of neon gravestones. It's supposed to be this, like, appealing idea of ending your life. So anyways, that all being said, it almost, I wonder if that's kind of the same idea that sleep is trying to do, that sleep wants to ultimately consume Vessel, and that if giving his life, taking his life to reach sleep is something that sleep glorifies. I don't know. Because if it is, then you would get these really strange, like him speaking about negative things as a positive thing. Okay, and then we get the repeated, this verse is repeated. I would, yeah, it's interesting that it calls it a verse 3. All right, don't wake me, don't wake me, don't wake me up. So this sounds like he doesn't want, because he talks about bandaging his trenches. But then he's saying, don't wake me. Could be referring to dying or being dead. Waking up could mean being resuscitated. They don't want to be resuscitated and come back to life. This can mean suicide attempt as well. Or like, don't wake me because I'm trying to get to sleep. I don't know. Let's go check out a few of these other pages we've been looking at just to see a different side of things. So this is in general about the album. Sleep Token only seemed to emerge from the pandemic even stronger than before. The enforced break had given a fresh wave of fans chance to discover their music and lore, and fan groups had begun to sprout across the internet, everywhere from Reddit to Discord, YouTube, and beyond. Returning to the stage with a performance to a packed tent at the 2021 Download Pilot, Sleep Token had officially bubbled up to become a bona fide cult sensation. Their next album featured heavy nautical themes, and coordinates featured on each single sent fans on an Easter egg hunt ahead of the album's release. By the time they hit the road at the end of 2021, playing sold-out rooms each night, it was apparent Sleep Token were now one of metal's strongest new contenders. All right, and this is specifically about the song. While Sundowning drops listeners into the thick of Vessel's destructive worship, This Place Will Become Your Tomb takes us back to where it all started, underwater. Before becoming a submissive pawn eager to spread Sleep's message, Vessel finds himself at the water's edge, prepared to take his own life. The record charts his physical and spiritual descent. Each track is accompanied by nautical depth in meters and fathoms, marking the downward journey of Vessel's body as it plummets and his mind surrenders to the solace of sleep. That's crazy. Piano-drenched opener Atlantic roots us in the scene. Vessel begging for his life to be taken by the titular ocean's blue light. In the limbo between life and death, electronics twisting, Vessel encounters another form of sleep, the deity that will be his salvation. The nautical depth associated with the Atlantic, 914 meters, is the depth at which anglerfish live, hence the fish on the single cover. So that's interesting. Let me know if you know, is it trying to say here that this album takes place before the events of sundowning? And this is more of this descent that leads him to this awakening and this understanding of sleep? All right, this little blurb says, Vessel wakes up in a hospital after a failed attempt, perhaps to sever his connection with sleep. So this is saying, no, it's after the events, and has talked through the damage. He begs to not be woken up and slowly falls back into sleep's grasp throughout the course of this album. So yeah, I don't know. It could be that due to the relationship with sleep through sundowning, he's ready to take his life or dealing with some fallout of that toxic relationship, which, you could again tie into the human nature of things, that on the other side of these really painful toxic relationships that he keeps going back to, that he is a victim of and also a participant in, that there's this kind of depression unraveling that follows. So I don't know. We'll see as we keep exploring. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll have a conversation there. Thanks for being with me for this one. Hope to see you in the next one, because we're eating good.